That always goes so quick. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's a good something somewhere in the universe as we speak. And welcome to Life in the Hologram on the Revolution Radio Network. And we're here with myself, Madeline Rudy, and Caroline Bell Tumblety. And we're live somewhere. And I want to just give a little plug here. I'm tomorrow. I don't know if you ever heard of this EES system. It's like scalar wave technology.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I'm going down here to the Twin Valley Health and Wellness.com center. That's their website. And we're going to go in the room and see.
Cool.
They have 24 arrays. So maybe something miraculous will happen, and we're hoping that it does. But yeah, I wanted to give them a plug. And, you know, if you tell them, if you live around this area, like in Lancaster County, Berks County, like in Pennsylvania, they're going to give you a $20 off if you decide that you want to go in to this EES system room. And look it up, because it's very interesting technology, and they have these things all over the world now. I'm not sure whether they have them in Scotland yet, but they seem to be going all over the world. And according to some of the testimonials, people are having miraculous healings. So,
does it cost? Is there a cost?
Yeah, it's a cost.
Not free? No, everybody, we all want free.
It's a cost.
Is it a hefty cost?
Well, I don't think so. It's no more than like an hour massage.
Okay.
But it's for 2 hours.
And
then on a Wednesday, they do have a discount for 2 hours for 1 hour.
That's good.
It's like $60 an hour.
That's like a massage, yeah.
Yeah, it's about the cost of a massage. I had to save my money.
Yeah. Well, I hope it goes fantastic. And
yeah.
let us know. Maybe even record a wee bit.
Yeah, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a little video, and then I'll post it on Facebook. And then I'll talk about it next week too, because I have Phil Lang coming on, and he does a product he has a fantastic program. It's called Solex. And you do like a voice recording, and then he sends you back like a little MP3, and you play this, and this helps like all different parts of your body. And what this Solex thing does, it does like a whole complete screening of your body. I mean, it's more in depth than what you would get if you went to the doctor or a hospital for a million different tests.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm excited about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And this EES system, they're supposed to have the Fibonacci series in there too. So it should be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It should be interesting. So I'll give a full report next week. But you can go there. Twin Valley Health and Wellness.com is their website, and check it out. And our little card says improve spiritual communication skills, interpret signs and symbols, experience connection with angels and spirit guides, feel serenity and calmness.
Ooh, I like that, Madeline.
Yeah, that kind of goes with what's going to happen here tonight.
Yeah. And what is going to happen here tonight is we have a fantastic guest. We have Mark Olly, and I'm going to hit my video off, and I'm going to read Mark's bio. And so sit back, people, and listen. This man has had an interesting life.
To say the least.
To say the least, yes, really. To put my glasses on too. Okay, so Mark Olly, as we welcome Mark Olly, he was born in 1962 in Warrington, England, and educated at Appleton Hall County Grammar School, Warrington College of Art and Design, the University of Liverpool Institute of Extension Studies Field Archaeology Unit, various business schools, and El-Shaddai College of Advanced Ministry UK, Manchester, where he obtained a certificate of ministry, Ct.M.AP, and a Diploma of Biblical Studies. For over 22 years, he worked as a professional musician, live DJ, compare and music management, founding Angelharp Music, Unicorn Entertainment Agency Ltd, and Legendthink Ltd, one of the first multimedia companies in the world, before moving on to pursue a solo career as a writer, archaeologist, and television presenter. This career has so far taken him to all parts of the UK, France, Egypt, Norway, Italy, Bulgaria, Cyprus, South America, Turkey, Malta, and North Africa in search of the ancient and the mysterious. His hobbies include collecting antiques and geological specimens, Dark Age, Celtic, medieval costume reenacting, oh that sounds so cool, staging occasional exhibitions and live events, public speaking, and investigating ancient sites. He has 7 major books in print, appeared at Carlton's television, The History Detectives, wrote and presented all 3 seasons, 22 episodes of ITV's Granada's award-nominated Lost Treasures. Adventures Archaeology series, has presented for Sky History Channel, writes, presents and directs DVDs for US media giants Reality Entertainments, Reality Films, wrote and directed 4 music videos for international US band Hayseed Dixie and 3 for Sacred Winds 2014-2015 Christmas charity single, occasionally appears in movies, and recently played sessions with bands Soul Path, Sacred Wind, Metal Hose, Atacama Giants, Wolf, and Copper Worm. He is visiting lecturer at Wilsomlow Guild and University of Chester, occasionally heads up his own archaeology unit and runs his own DVD production and props company, Mythco. Books and publications include Celtic, Warrington and Other Mysterious Book 1, Celtic, Warrington and Other Mysterious Book 2, Celtic, Warrington and Other Mysterious Book 3. They were published by Churnet Valley Books, Leek, Staffordshire, signed for 3 more books, including Book 4. Consultant on the Keys to Avalon, Lloyd and Blake, Elemental 2000, and Pendragon, The Origins of Ather. Featured in Living Edge magazine and all local and regional newspapers, Community News, Cheshire County newspapers, writer 2000 to 2017, and various internet sites. The Disappearing Ninth Legion with John Aspin, 2011, published by O Books, John Hunt Publishing Limited. The Life and Times of the Real Robin Hood, 2015, published by Chronos Books, John Hurt Publishing Limited. Revealing the Green Man, 2016, published by Moon Books and John Hurt Publishing. And Crystal Skulls and Human Heads, 2021. Film and television appearances include excavations at Hendry Farm, Crowen, BBC, ITV, and SC4 News, 1999. Divine Energies and Angels, Independent, 2001. Granada News, Northwest Heritage, The History Detectives, Sir Garwin and the Green Knight, Carlton Television, 2003. Wow, this is like I think this is a book I'm reading.
It is.
It is a book.
He never sleeps.
And it goes on for like, I think there's 3 more pages here. And
I'm just sat here thinking, where on earth have you found all this?
You gave it to us.
Oh no, there's a much shorter version. You must have got the long version.
Well, I want to
Yeah.
make sure that I get in that you're currently writing the book, Keys to the Templars. I want to.
Yeah, no, you've skipped two out because after Crystal Skulls and Human Heads, there's
Uh-huh.
the Polychronicon of Merlin, Joseph, and Arthur,
Okay.
which is again Philip Mantle, and then the latest one is Europe's Roswell, 40 years since impact,
Mm.
which is the UFO crash book that again is Philip Mantle. And then at the moment, I'm doing the Templar book, etc. I must have sent you that some time back because I'm up to 9 books now. There's 9 in
Wow.
print, all available on Amazon, as well as some DVDs. And the best news of all, which I can let you know, is that all of the TV stuff that I've ever done, so that series and the documentaries and everything else, is now on YouTube. It's only took us about 18 years to get it all on there, but it's all on there now, so you can go and check me out on YouTube.
Wow.
Well,
I don't really know where to begin.
yeah. Well, just tell us how it all started.
Oh gosh, where do I begin? Yeah, I must apologise to anybody that's viewing this, by the way, because people will notice I'm totally invisible, and that's a technical problem at my end. So just get the elephant out of the room because that's the elephant you can't see. Right, where that's me. Where do I begin? Well, I suppose I'll start at the beginning, really. I mean, the music career is dead easy. Let's do that one first. That's really, really easy. It's going to get personal tonight, I know. So let's dive straight in there. My parents were the last survivors of their family. So when I was born, there was only really my mum's mum, which is my grandma on my mum's side, that was still alive. Everybody else had died out. I was a very late baby. They were in the 30s when they had me. And she bought me a tin drum for my first Christmas. And then she passed away. So I've got no memory of her at all. But apparently I beat this tin drum out of shape, kept the drumsticks, and then started on furniture, and then anything I could get my hands on. So by the time I was 3 years old, my mum and dad had had enough of me destroying the entire house, which is where it was going, and they bought me a very small red sparkle Premier drum kit. It was only a sort of a 4-piece with a couple of cymbals. And here I am still playing the drums now. So there you go. I know what was going to happen then. You're going to get dead worried and think, oh no, he's going to go through every band he's ever been in. No, I'm not going to do that. I've been in about probably, I think last count was about 68 bands maybe over the
Wow.
years. I was a session drummer. So, I mean, for 20 odd years, I clocked up probably 50 of those in the first, 21, 22 years of doing it. Yeah, by default, that ended up, like I say, being my career. So if somebody says, "What do I do?" Because like everybody has a job, so if somebody says, "What do you do?" I'm principally an archaeologist. So again, that brackets everything. That's really simple to understand because everything I do is related in some way to history. So that's easy to follow that one. And then the other side of it, everything over there, people say, well, what actually are you? So I am a drummer. That's what I am. That's basically what I am. So that brackets everything else that I've done. So that's, the music industry, the production side, the various music companies I had and all things like that. So it sounds like I've had 10 million jobs and I've got thousands of skills and all the rest of it. But that's not strictly the case. It's either going to be history or it's going to be music. It's going to go one of those two directions as a rule. Even television production, and doing a few appearances in movies and directing and music videos and all that sort of thing. It all overlaps,
Mhm.
all the television I've done as related to history. The Mythco, the props company, we tend to do historical props, occasionally sci-fi and other things, but predominantly history. So yeah, that kind of brackets everything. Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
That was a
that's a
quick
lot.
interview. I can go home now.
So,
Well, after you were in the 68 bands, how did you get time to go out and do archaeology?
Yeah, we can dive into the complications of that a little bit more if you want. Yeah, well, once I got hold of a drum kit, I mean, that's a fairly straight line in a sense that I was always playing. I was always playing at home. I was always making loads of noise. I mean, eventually, when I got into being a teenager, I'd come running home from school, dive in the garage, which is where my kit was set up, and start playing. But that was in the days before digital, so everything had to come out of really loud speakers. And I was a really loud drummer. I was very much in the sort of Cozy Powell, John Bonham, that kind of bracket. That's what I'm like. And you could clearly recognise what tune I was playing, apparently about 3/4 of a mile away, on the other side of the village. So, people here locally have put up with a lot of noise for a very long time, but it paid off in the end. I don't tend to go into detail because it's kind of a sort of a past life within this life, if you like that, because met loads of people, met loads of famous people. Everybody wants to know, who did you meet, what did you do, who did you play for, and this, that, and the other. Well, that's an entire night's program, and because it's past, I tend to slide past that. I kind of, nothing to see here, kind of very quietly go past that. The educational side of it, I finished up at Warrington College of Art and Design, and that's the start of my archaeology career, because my dad had already got me digging as a volunteer digger. From about the age of 8 years old onwards, I was working on archaeological digs with him because he was a volunteer digger. And then when I went to art college in Warrington, the old art college, as you walk out of the front door, immediately opposite on the other side of the road is Warrington Museum. So what I used to do was finish doing the art college thing, walk across the road and walk straight into the museum and start on the extension studies courses that they were running there. And you've got to remember, in the 1970s, you couldn't just disappear off and do a degree in archaeology. It was something that was still in development. There weren't full-time, professional, paid, degree archaeologists in the same way that they have them now. So I just, without even realizing it, I got trained by some of the best archaeologists that ever lived in the 70s and the 80s, and to some extent into the 90s. So I stayed with them. I stayed with them for 5 years. I trained up to the standard of site director. And then I started doing sessions in a local recording studio. So at this point, I'm doing three things at once. I'm at art college, I'm doing my archaeology weekends and all that. And then whenever I'm needed, I get called into the studio. And then round about 83, 84, I got a record deal. First record deal came in. And that was interesting because by that point, I'd finished art college. At that point, I was trained up to site director level with archaeology. And then wham, all of a sudden, it's like, there you go. That's what you're going to do. You're off to do your drumming and your music and the rest of it. But again, music. I mean, music's great. If you go on tour with a band, oh, where are you playing tonight? Oh, we're playing Canterbury. Right off to the cathedral in the afternoon. While they're setting all the gear up and stuff. Here we go. Oh, where we're playing today? Oh, there's always a stone circle or an archaeology site or a museum or an abbey, or it's just, if you ever get a chance to come to the UK and explore, you could spend the rest of your life here. There's so much stuff. So I've actually got a lot of friends now who are musicians who play in professional bands and lighting techs and sound engineers, and they have very fond memories of me dragging them round, fields with strange things sticking up in them, and so although it all sounded disjointed when I began, it does fit together. This thing has a certain synchronicity to it. It kind of flowed. And then when I retired doing that, I mean, eventually I ended up with a bad back, which for a drummer is the best of the options, because you either end up with piles, incontinence, or a bad back. So I think I got the best one of the three. And I had to sort of step down from the professional touring side of things in 1994. And then I wrote my first books. I'm laid up. I can't do anything. I can't go anywhere, or somebody along the lines had invented this thing called a laptop. Actually, no, back then, where was it? We were still on keyboards and screen and tower. So I thought, oh yeah, I can do this. So I can't do very much else. So I wrote Celtic Warrington 1, 2, and 3. And a friend of mine who was at Chester, which has a massive archaeology department, hence that's why I was there. They also have a media department, and he wanted to do a history series, television series. So we took the books, we pitched the series to ITV, and ITV said, yeah, it looks like a good idea. Yeah, we might buy into this. And we're like, well, we're thinking of calling it Lost Treasures. Oh, and they're like, oh, no, that name's probably gone. That'll have been used 10,000 times. Guess what? It hadn't. We'd actually dropped on an obvious name that nobody else had got. And the guy in the commissioning place, the guy behind the big desk, said, well, we'll have the series on one condition. And we're like, what's that? It's like, you're presenting it. So it was a baptism of fire. It was like, okay, if I'm presenting it, I'm presenting it. Off we go. I mean, at this point through art college, I'd tinkered in film and stuff, so I had more than a passing knowledge of how it was done. But that really was a baptism of fire. So that kind of gets you from 94 to 2004. And then 2004, the last time the Lost Treasures was broadcast on Sky, I believe that was in sort of 2010, 2011. So it gets you all the way up to that point. By which time I'm off writing books. I'm kind of off doing that side of things, and then movies and a few DVDs for people and other appearances. The last appearance I did last year was season 19 of Ancient Aliens, Crop Circles. I'm on that one, which apparently is going down quite well. I only watched it the other day, and it's actually quite a good episode. I'm impressed. I'm not particularly wonderful in it, but the program's great. Yeah. So that's kind of a potted history of pretty much what I've done and how I've sort of arrived at where I am, with loads and loads of other bits and bobs along the way. So you guys fire away, throw some interesting questions.
Well, what'd you find in the crop circles?
Well, that was interesting. The reason they asked me to do that program, because in the 1990s, when we had two men and a couple of planks and a length of rope, and that was how they were saying they were doing these things. I was actually involved with the guys that were serialologists, and they were doing the early studies of the first circles that came out. So they're picking up electronic, electromagnetic, electrical, all kinds of things are going on in these circles. I was a dowser at this point, so I'm picking up dowsing stuff. We're looking at structure, we're looking at crop marks, which is what archaeologists do. They finished up, there were scientific papers written, about crop circles back then. And that's when they discovered how you could tell a fake from a real one. Because obviously the fake ones, you can tell if someone's been tramping around, smashing the corn down with pieces of wood and string. It's fairly obvious it does damage, that you can pick up on. But the real thing is done almost like an electrical or a radioactive burn, and it bends the actual stalk without snapping it and things like that. And of course, the patterns are so phenomenally complex. My favorite, I think it's 96 circles in a giant, it's like a Mandelbrot helix. It's like a huge pattern. It's triple armed pattern, and it's in the field directly adjacent to Stonehenge. And it happened in broad daylight on an afternoon. So there's a big party of tourists at Stonehenge. They all go wandering off. The next party comes in 20 minutes later, and there's 96 of these circles in the field next door, and nobody saw any of them arrive. And it's National Trust property as well. So people don't just go wandering here, there and everywhere. So that's a belter. That was an absolute humdinger, that one. It's a very famous one, the triple arm spiral. That's another one of these that really got my interest. So, I suppose, I don't know whether you'd call that a hobby or a professional interest. It's a bit of both, really. But yeah, I was involved right at the beginning. So I think that's why they asked me to do the show. That and the fact that I'm really into high strangeness. I love high strangeness, weirdness of all kinds. I'm the archetypal teenager that decided for a holiday while he was at high school, he was going to go off to Loch Ness and see if he could find Nessie. I am that person that did that. I did it twice, in fact. Didn't find anything.
No.
No.
You got to go back then.
Isn't that in your area, Caroline?
Well, it's north of me. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereabouts are you in Scotland?
Yeah.
Are you Glasgow, Edinburgh?
I'm actually on the west coast. I was born in Glasgow, but I live on the west coast of Scotland. Yeah.
That's where my family came from. We're Clanranald of MacDonald.
Oh, cool! Very cool.
That's
the
going
castle
back
here has MacDonald. Yeah, like it's a ruin, but there was McDonald's there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a castle for Clanranald as well somewhere, but don't ask me where it is because I've not got me notes. I'd have to work that one out. But yeah, it's about 1,000 years ago. We were archers for Clanranald.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, Ayrshire's got an interesting. It has an interesting history. Will we call it history? Because a lot is missing.
Yeah, I've just kind of got blah, you know, you got it all, you kind of big splurge, you know.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
That's what happens when you don't pin me down, you see. I've got a tendency to waffle, but go on.
No, you're not.
No.
I love hearing it. I really do have to ask this just because I'm a fan of David Lynch. You worked that way, David Lynch, didn't you? You worked on something.
Yeah, that was interesting. He put the gauntlet down quite a few years ago, and I think it was in the late 1990s. And he said, "Look, there's all these independent production companies out there, you know." So he threw the gauntlet down, put a few music tracks out, and said, "Look, I want videos to these, you know, and may the best man win." So I got involved with a company in Manchester that was doing one production. And it was interesting because at this point, you got to remember, I'm renowned for being this guy who dresses in black with a big hat and runs around pointing at archaeological sites. And my part in that particular video, I'm actually a street sweeper, but
Wow.
I'm also a goat. So you don't know it's me. It's like it's a goat with horns in a high vis vest outside a restaurant sweeping up. Typical weird, very, very strange David
David
Lynch
Lynch,
stuff.
yeah.
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 But apparently it went down really well. I mean, the thing we produced, you know, he included it in his anthology of materials. So yeah.
He must have liked it, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing you picked up on that one. I don't think anyone's ever mentioned that before. Yeah.
Oh, I like David Lynch, you know.
There you go.
Yeah. So
What a
when I saw
guy.
that, I was like, oh, I've got to ask about that. The other thing I got to ask you about the Arthur, the Joseph, you know, and Merlin. I gotta ask you about this.
The Polychronicon.
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
Yes.
that's the word that nobody can pronounce.
I can't pronounce it.
Yeah.
No, I know.
Polychronochrome.
Yeah, Polychronicon. That's it. Everybody asks where it comes from. It was a monk at Chester, you know, back in the 1300s, and a Polychronicon is a chronological history. And he really, I mean, he really went bonkers. He did a chronological history of the world, but
Oh
one
my
of the
God.
big chapters in one of his manuscripts is on Arthur. And the publishers were all saying, you can't possibly put a book out, you know, with a name like that. And I'm like, but you know, Arthur worldwide, there's about 300 books on Arthur that comes out worldwide every year. And you've got to have a title that nobody else has got. Now, I fell foul of this once before because when I did the life and times of the real Robin Hood, I spelled ROBYNHOODE. And that's been a real sort of thorn in the side of people trying to find that book. It's not been an easy one to find. So I thought, Polychronicon. If you type that in, you're not going to get anything else. You'll only get that book. So yeah, I started it. I made a film when I was at art. Well, just before I went to art college. I went to college in '78 and I made the film in '77. And it was all about King Arthur. The idea was this guy gets catapulted in time, forward in time, and he becomes like an archetype for Arthur. And he ends up with the Grail, the sword, Merlin's magic stone, and the Lady of the Lake. And she takes him back to the time portal, and then he gets catapulted back into this time period. And it's interesting because the whole of a year passes in the one day that he's there. So he arrives in the morning and then goes right through the year in the space of a day, and then he leaves in the evening. So there's all kinds of nice little twists in it. But I did all the research. I started doing the research then, and I've got to say, and a lot of authors have said this in the past, you get addicted. It's incredibly addictive when you start looking at it. And then I realised, as an archaeologist, as I gradually got older, I thought, well, nobody seems to have actually looked at what is real. You know, what is the oldest of all of the different bits that you find in Arthur. Where does he first get mentioned? What time period? What writings are there out there that you could say are, going back to the Dark Ages, rather than all the medieval twaddle that gets loaded on top of it. So that was the impetus, and that's when I started. So it took 45 years to finish writing it and get it into print. And I've got to say, hats off to Philip Mantle, Flying Disc Press, because it's not exactly a book about flying saucers, And we had this conversation. He was like, "Well, why do you want me to publish it?" And I said, "I don't really know." And then it dawned on me. It dawned on me one day, if he's willing to publish books about, some guy that met a little green man up a country lane somewhere, then Arthur, a different version of Arthur and a different view of Arthur is actually not that strange. It's not that far out there. It's not that difficult. And the best part of the whole thing, which most people don't know, is we decided it's quite a big book. It's kind of 8 inches by whatever it is, 7 inches. So it's quite a big book. And Philip said, "I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll have a bash at doing it in hardback, because most of my other books are paperback." He said, "Oh, we'll have a go at doing it hardback and see what happens." Neither of us realised that the hardbacks on Amazon are about 1 inch bigger. And they're just fabulous. They are fantastic. And I got a really excited email from Philip, and he's going, "This book's amazing. It's the best book I've ever done. It's incredible. I've just got the test copy through, and it's amazing." So, at that point, I don't think it mattered if we didn't sell any of them, because it just visually, and I would say this to anybody that's thinking of ordering it, we don't get paid as much for the hardback, but blow it, go and buy the hardback, because the hardback of that book, it's just amazing. And there's so much in it, I mean, John Matthews, who's the big British medievalist study person for things to do with Arthur, John and Caitlin Matthews, it's John. He wrote this fantastic introduction for it. Really amazing introduction. He basically just said, "I wish I'd had this book like 40 odd years ago, because it would have saved me a hell of a lot of trouble and, work trying to find all the info." And it's basically, that's why I did it. So that's out now. So the next one is the Bible one, because I started that in 1978. I started that the year after. So we're going to a book of biblical proportions.
You're muted, Madeline.
Yeah, I just saw that. My mouth was going, but you couldn't hear me. What was the real thing that Jesus used as the miracles to cure the sick?
Whoa. Right, we've clearly jumped straight into the new book material. Wow. Okay, I'll try and say something that's not going to get you banned.
Don't worry.
Do you know what? I'm really going to stick my neck out here, because anybody that knows anything about sort of how the Bible rocks, God starts off in, being kind of everything's in God and God is in everything. That's kind of the Garden of Eden, the making everything kind of thing. And then as we sort of roll through the Old Testament, eventually it comes down to God sort of inhabiting the Holy of Holies in the temple. But then by the time you got to Jesus and he's wandering around doing what he's doing, God at this point has started to come out again. It's not limited anymore to just one race in one location, whatever. Because you've got to bear in mind, that's what the Bible is. Everyone goes, "Oh, where did you get the wives from? Where's the extra races? What about the giants, all the different species of humans, this, that, and the other?" Well, the Bible just focuses on us, Homo erectus. It's just a book that's written for us. So once you know that, it makes perfect sense. Back to answering your question, it's that God power which through the Old Testament, in a sense, gets focused. But then in the New Testament, it goes the opposite way. It kind of explodes back out again. Jesus is just the first of many. I mean, he said, the stuff I'm doing, you guys will be able to do more than this, much more than this. Of course, when he dies on the cross, the temple curtain tears. Well, that's God coming out of the Holy of Holies. That must have been a fantastic afternoon in Jerusalem. That, you know, 1 minute the temple curtain goes, you know, and it bursts open. Next minute there's 500 people raised out of the graves immediately outside. You know, it's just bonkers. I would love to have been there and seen that. So yeah, I'm going to blame what the Bible blames. I'm going to blame the power of God, you know, which I think independent, I'm going, you know, let's really stick my neck out independently. Whichever avenue you take, whether it's mathematics, physics, science, chemistry, biology, astrology, astronomy, you know, whichever avenue you go down, sooner or later, you're going to come face to face with a creative force that's behind it all. And that's what I was getting at when I did the book Revealing the Green Man. Because what I wanted to do was get to grips with this idea, this concept that there's a force, you know, it's life, it's the fifth element, if you like, you know, fire, water, earth, and air, and spirit. You know, it's that extra element that always gets left out. So, you know, the ancients were aware of that. So I think it's time that we kind of became aware of that. So yeah, the answer's God. I could have just said that, couldn't I? That would have saved us a good 10 minutes.
Yeah, but the thing is,
I liked your description though. I liked how you came to it. Yeah.
They did, you know, I think that part's missing in the Bible. If they say you can do things far greater than I.
Oh, it's not missing. It's not missing.
What do we use?
It's in the four Gospels. It's in the four Gospels. Do you know what? It's funny when you get into the New Testament, you know, you kind of read it and you think, wow, you know, this guy's, you know, feeding the 5,000 with loads of bread, and he's walking across water, and he's raising the dead, and he's doing this, that, and the other, you know, and then you kind of go, yeah, that's like reading the Brothers Grimm, you know, it's a bit of a fairy tale, and we'll just kind of, you know, just walk past it and go, yeah. But that's not the idea. That's not really what it's all about. It's about us. I'll go back to, I mean, I got into the whole churchy thing because I actually came at it. Originally, I was into witchcraft, and then I drifted into Satanism, Luciferianism, and then I was a right mess as a teenager. Funnily enough, before I actually did anything successfully, so that's before I was at art college, before I was a musician, etc., etc., before I'd actually reached 16. And I never got converted. I never got preached at or anything like that. I went on a kind of a church weekend away to chase the ladies, like everybody did back then. And I just got like infected, spiritually infected by a force I wasn't familiar with. So I literally went to the guy running the weekend and I just said, you know, this is where I've come from. This is what's happening. This is how I feel now. And this guy who was leading the weekend just looked at me and he just went, well, if what you're telling me is true and you're starting to feel something, why don't you just talk back? And it was like someone had hit me in the face with a wet fish. You know, it was so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we go wrong. Because there's all this stuff, you know, that we know about. It's not just in the New Testament, it's in the Old Testament. It's not even just in the Bible. It's everywhere. If you look at natural theology, natural philosophy, you know, it's everywhere. Every single religion without fail either sticks somebody between you and God or goes directly to God. But the end result is still the same. And it's the idea that somehow you can talk to God.
Yeah.
And that's the bit we've missed. You know what I mean? A bit like me trying to get me a picture up on here earlier on, you know, trying to get me ugly mug to show on Skype, and it refused to do it. It suddenly becomes like a one-way communication. And, you know, you can't really do that with God. You can't kind of cut him off and ignore everything. Well, I'm saying him. Truthfully, it's it, because it's everything. Yeah. So, you know, yeah, it's literally all encompassing. So, you know,
maybe it's a computer program.
Well, the question is, if it is a computer program, if we are in a matrix, then who made the matrix?
Us.
The aliens.
Ah, yeah, you see.
Metatron.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't rule out the next question anyone's going to ask you is going to be, how on earth can you say all this and still be into aliens? Well, there's whatever it is, 800 billion stars out there that are like us, that could be inhabited, you know. That's the kind of figure they've calculated. So the same rules that seem to apply to us here apply universally. You know, the mathematics, the physics, everything. It just seems to transfer. But that seems to also speak of construction and structure and order, some form of creative, impetus, even if it's, a grey guy who's, thin as a lat and has giant bug eyes and, steps out of technology we know nothing about. They are still physically existent and they still obey basically the same rules that we do. But obviously they've got another set of tools in their toolkit that we don't have. But it doesn't, in any way, it doesn't exclude an overriding creative force. I think the aliens would probably, they'd cope perfectly well with Christ's miracles. They'd just come along and go, hey, we know how he did that. I'm sure they would. Positive they would know how he did it, but it all begins with a kind of an acceptance that there's a force bigger than us, and then a reaching out to the force that's bigger than us, and then working with it. Jesus was cheating in a way. I'm going to say this because obviously he came to fulfill laws. He came to fulfill prophecies. He had a very clear, fixed idea of what his identity was and what it seems to be. And anybody out there who's even the slightest bit spiritual will get this. You've got to sort of bring yourself into alignment with the particular path that you're set to walk. So if you're walking the right path, if you're plowing the right furrow, then stuff really starts to happen. Doors open, you meet the right people, coincidences, there's this tumbling of, it's like putting a key in a door, well, talking to the creature, the thing, the spirit that's behind it all, it's just part of that process. I think, it's kind of what we were made to do. It fills a gap in us. There's, years ago they used to say it was like a God-shaped hole. It fills a God-shaped hole, which no other creature on earth, I don't think, has the same problem we have. A sperm whale wakes up in the morning and just goes, "Hi, God." Or whatever in its own way, It's only us that really struggle with it, I think, in that sense. I don't know if that answers. Did that answer the question?
You didn't give me the formula. Told me it was God. I want to know A, B, C, D.
Hey, well, listen, I don't dodge questions as a rule, but I have got to say, don't ask me that. Ask the boss. That's probably the biggest fob off in eternity, isn't it? I'm sorry, I'm not in charge of this show.
Don't have that information. Yeah. What gets me, like when we look at history and we look at all these ancient structures, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. They're all over the planet. However, our history, the way that it is, would have us think that we were primitive, not really minded in such a way that we could have actually accomplished these things, which I feel is actually kind of degrading to us as a species. But I think in another vein, that there's probably more than one species here. And what I'm trying to get at is, do you think Jesus was an alien?
Yeah.
Good question.
You know?
Well, if you want to get into species, I suppose the book for you would be Crystal Skulls and Human Heads.
Yeah.
Because that is the species book. At the time I wrote that, we knew there were at least 9 different human species: Homo sapiens, Denisovans, Neanderthals, etc. I believe it now we're up to 27 different species, and it keeps getting more and more. So rather than us being the fantastic superior race we've always believed we are, we could actually just be survival of warriors. We're just a warrior species. We happen to be intelligent, but we certainly weren't the biggest or the strongest or the most intelligent ever to live. I think the Paracas, who died out about 400 or 500 years ago, their heads are 3.5 times the size of ours.
Wow.
You know, if some guy gets a brain that size and he's got the capacity of Einstein, you know, get 10 of them in a room, he'll tell you in about 5 minutes how to build a pyramid. You know, it's not
Yeah.
difficult. They're super duper wet computers. So I think the elongated skulls is the key to past civilizations. So I am actually answering your question. I'm just kind of going round the block with it. Was Jesus an alien? The short answer to that is yes.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, though, and this is the bit we've struggled over the years to cope with, I think, on the one hand, he's fully human.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, the bit that's keeping him going, the bit that drives him, you know, his DNA, his blood, his structure, his whatever, clearly isn't. You know, he's packing something that is different from us, and it pops up occasionally. For a start, I'm going to give you 2 examples here. One of them's biblical, one of them isn't. The biblical one is after he decided he's going to come back from the dead. Now, that's not something we do every day. We don't, you know, die and then come back 3 days later. We've just had Easter, and that's all celebrating that. But when he came back, he was clearly different because he still had holes in his hands, and he had the cut in his side from the spear, and he had, you know, marks where the thorns had been, but no blood. So what was powering him? It can't have been biological blood. So I'm going to go with light. I think he was functionally different, you know, and it's got to be light because he can pass through solid objects. He ascends up into the clouds, you know, he appears without anybody seeing him come in locked rooms and things like that. So in that sense, that then suddenly does become alien, you know, by definition. It's something very, very different. And the other side of it, which only came out very recently, scientists have re-examined the samples from the Turin Shroud.
I was just about to ask you that.
And they've had a look at the blood, and it's only got the female chromosomes in it. Okay. Now, the problem there is that it's actually possible biologically for females to reproduce without males. That is a known phenomena. It happens in quite a few species, but they always produce females. Now that's the problem, because in nature, it does happen in nature, but that would mean that Christ should have been female. Now, depending where you go on this, I mean, if you really, really want to go like careering off the edge of the flat earth, then at the end of the day, you've got this idea of the divine hermaphrodite, which is the idea that someone's both. Now, I'm not suggesting necessarily that he had both, because he might actually have ended up having neither, but clearly he is composed of elements which are both male and female, because his very DNA is female. It's only female. But then, you know, somebody said this, you know, why does he represent every single religion that's ever been on the planet before he gets here? Well, that's precisely what a messenger from God would do. You know, if an alien came today, the alien would try and hit everybody, would try and get the message across to as many people as possible. That also includes women as well as men. So why would he not be both? You know, why would he not be? So that's going to really upset a lot of the listeners. That might be something that will get you banned.
Well, you know, like as you're talking about that, for some reason my mind goes to Nefertiti and Akhenaten, and the statues that are depicted of him shows him with hips that are very, very female. And so I think where you're going with this, like, what is it they call it? Is it protogenesis? Like, the females being able to reproduce?
Yes. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, like, I think where you're going, I think this is good. For me, anyway.
I think the only difference is that you ended up with a celestial being in the form of Gabriel, popping up to Mary and going, "Hey, guess what? You're going to have a baby."
Yeah.
And Mary's like, "No, I'm not. You're
No,
having me on. You're pulling me leg. Nah, that's not going to happen." Um, because I'm still a virgin. And then, she has the baby and then ends up being a virgin again. But that's another story for another day. But yeah, basically the bottom line, I mean, at the end of the day, God being God can do anything, absolutely anything, And the idea as well that, we are the only super species of choice, that's not strictly true either, because you've got all these other species, 27 plus others. But then also there's an argument that some of the dinosaurs were equally as capable, shall we say, as us in many respects. And then you're off into high strangeness. What about all of the interdimensional beings? What about angels? Where are they coming from? What are they?
Yeah.
Beings of light. Now you're into the UFO community. You've changed track again slightly. That's more or less where Europe's Roswell's taken me, into the realms of high strangeness. So I do look at interdimensionals. I look at time travel. I look at, where these flying saucers and little grey men might be coming from. I do all that in Crystal Skulls and Human Heads and Europe's Roswell. I cover that in the last chapters.
Well, even look at Mary, when Mary came to the three kids, and I think it was a hologram, but that's only
Oh, are you
me.
talking about Fatima? Are you talking? Yeah.
Yeah, Fatima, and I think she appeared in Medjugorje.
Mm-hmm.
I
See,
think it was a hologram.
Well, I have no problem with that at all. If you actually zoom right back, if you zoom right out and just look at the Bible as a whole, then the idea that the god marries the goddess is a concept. And if the virgin gives birth to a child, then effectively the child is legally, according to the Old Testament, married to its own mum. So that's why Jesus didn't have kids, didn't go anywhere else, didn't marry anybody else, didn't do anything else. And that's why you've got this weird thing where Joseph disappears completely. And, Jesus rejects his adopted brothers and sisters because they've come from, Joseph's family. He rejects all of that, and he just focuses totally on his mum, who at this point is probably only about 14, 15 years difference in age between the two of them. Now, I am definitely not saying at this point that they have any nookie. It's not that
But I
kind of
thought he
relationship.
married Mary Magdalena.
No, that's a different. No, the Magdalene is a different case in point. She is only ever known as his companion. And that famous quote as well. You're into Da Vinci Code territory now. Boy, we are bouncing around. It's like that squirrel in Over the Hedge. In the movie, you feed him coffee and he's off like a Mississippi. Yeah, I've got one of those. So yeah, it's where was I going with this? Yeah, it's a bit like that. It's yeah. Hang on, let's try and bring this home if I can. Don't want to spend all night on it. Yeah, basically, he's attached legally. It's Deuteronomy, the laws of Deuteronomy about breaking a virgin. He that breaks a virgin then legally is married in that sense. The Magdalene in the original Gospel of Mary, where he kisses the Magdalene, it doesn't say that he kisses her on the lips. And the portion of scripture that's reconstructed and used in the Da Vinci Code is corrupted. So what they've had to do is give it the best guess. Now, there is another gospel. There is another one, not the Gospel of Mary, but another one that mentions her as a companion, and he would give her a kiss. But then so do the French. Kiss on the cheek, kiss on the forehead, and they think of her more. The more you read about the disciples and the disciples' attitude towards Mary, she has got a very close relationship spiritually to Jesus, because he's actually training her, and that's the real shock factor. Is the fact that actually, you think, oh yeah, he's given the keys of heaven to Peter, got all these massive James and John and all these big fellas out there, Whoa, wait a minute. The first people to meet him when he was raised from the dead were ladies. It was the three Marys that met him at the tomb, So that's a different story. Again, you're looking at the femininity side of it, the female side of it. I don't think it's been covered up. I just think all that information ended up in bits of different gospels that kind of got lost along the way. I think if you dig for it, you can find it. But no, I don't think he ever produced any children with Mary Magdalene, and I don't think he ever, had anything but a legal relationship to his mother Mary. But the thing is, and this is where I came in at the beginning. If he's fulfilled all of the law, therefore he's fulfilled, the marital laws covering, virginity that's found in the Old Testament. Then literally, Mary is Queen of Heaven. She is, because she's married to the physical incarnation of God, which bizarrely makes the Catholic Church right. So come on, they've had 2,000 years to think about it. So when the Catholics are saying, yeah, Mary's Queen of Heaven, Mary, mother of God, etc., etc., and when those visions that you mentioned take place, she has clearly got a superior position that was established very early on when Christ was still alive. In fact, when he was born, it was established at his birth. So, I think, I don't go with any.
We might be going to a break.
Okay.
We're going to get back to your host.
We're back, and you've been listening to Life in the Hologram on Revolution Radio. And just a reminder, we are listener supported. So instead of buying that cup of Starbucks coffee, send your money into here to Revolution Radio so we can stay on the air.
Yes.
And don't forget that after this show, Caroline has her own show coming up, Navigating the Truth.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I also have a show that goes out here in Scotland every Monday. I'm actually on an FM radio station. It is 3TFM, which just stands for the Three Towns of Ayrshire. And I was thinking, like, Mark is actually quite close. And maybe I can, like, kind of talk in his ear and get him on that show. If you would. Yeah, something to think about. Are you back, Mark?
I am indeed. I never went away. Yeah. That was a fantastic segue into the adverts, wasn't it? Mary, Queen of Heaven. Next minute, oh, okay. Oh, I love it. I love it.
Well, in my opinion, Jesus was the best network marketer ever.
Well, he certainly knew what he was doing. It's like, if anyone could walk into a room, say something and drop the mic and then just walk out, that's him. That's him for sure.
12 guys to help him out.
Well, he ended up with 70, and then the 70 ended up becoming 200 and odd. And
that's a network marketer.
Odd. Yeah, wow, there you go. Yeah. Bit radical. Go on.
Yeah, the whole Jesus is really, really interesting. I think is it Ralph? Oh, I forget now his last name. That's horrible. He did an interesting, like, it was a Joseph Flavius. Is it like he kind of
Flavius Josephus? Yeah.
Yeah, Josephus. That's yeah. I think he. Yeah, Ralph Ellis. That's it, Ralph Ellis. I read like quite a few of the books that he put together. I think it's really interesting, because it's like this giant puzzle. There has to be information that can be found that can clear a lot of the unanswered questions, like the Magdalene. I mean, there's a whole thing with Mary Magdalene, and supposedly there was two Jesuses at one point, and like there's all kinds of stories, and also Arthur and Jesus. Like there's a kind of crossover there.
I am kind of swimming in that sea at the moment. It is interesting that you say more than one Jesus, but what people have got to understand. I mean, somebody questioned me about Jesus, evangelizing India and going down the Silk Road and things like that. I was talking to somebody only yesterday about that, but at the time that he was alive, you've got to remember the name Jesus isn't Jesus. It's actually Joshua. or Yeshua, and around about 21-22% of Jerusalem at that time, the males, the first name was Joshua. So
Right.
instantly, I have no
Right.
problem at all with somebody called Jesus evangelizing, India or whatever, but it just might not have been the same guy. And it's interesting that you say, well, at one point there were two of them. Well, funnily enough, the same thing happens to Arthur, but the same thing also happened to
Oh,
Robin Hood.
yeah.
You have one, and then all of a sudden somebody's like, oh, that's fantastic. What a fantastic guy. Let's call our son after him. And then it just goes from there. Pyramid, you end up with two of them, then four of them, then 8, then 16, then 32. And before you know it, like I say, 22% of Jerusalem's population is called Joshua. It's that is exactly what you would expect to happen with a popular name, but it's no help to us, at all. And what I'm trying to do is I am trying to dig into the other source material to do with the Bible. Josephus is one of them, but there's all sorts of other stuff: Dead Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi Library, Old Testament Apocrypha, New Testament Apocrypha, Lost Gospels. There's tons of it. So what I'm trying to do is make sense out of all that at the moment. It's painting an interesting picture. It really is. Don't know how much to give away. Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, she's a friend now, but Corinne Alyssa, she wrote the book A Journey of a Prophet, because Jesus has been talking to her since she's a little kid. And he channeled like this book through her.
It's very possible. But if anybody gets into a position like that, we've got tons of material to compare. So I'm, being the slightly academic person that I am, I tend to have a look at whatever's in front of me and then go and compare it with what I already know, which I did for Robin Hood. I did it for King Arthur, Merlin, Joseph of Arimathea, which is the Joseph in the King Arthur book. Obviously, you have to take everything you can possibly find and then compare any subsequent material to that. If it contradicts, then I wouldn't be sure. That having been said, though, I'm not averse to the idea that stuff can come through. I'll tell you an interesting story. I'm jumping over to the world of UFOs here a bit, but it illustrates the point. When I was in the music business, I had a friend who was a guitar player, and he was in his teens, and he really wanted to make it as a guitar player. So I kind of, gave him a bump up basically and got him some work and helped him out and what have you. But he had a very severely disabled mum. She couldn't really read. She couldn't really write. She certainly couldn't do mathematics. There was definitely something going wrong. I think in the end, they found a brain tumor because she passed away very early on, passed away in her 40s. But then one day I'm sat in his lounge and he's got a cup of tea and we're just chatting stuff over. And then his mum comes in and sits down, and she could communicate. Okay, she was chatting away, and she said, "They were here again last night." And I'm, "What do you mean they were here again last night?" "The aliens. A couple of them hover outside my window, and then one of them comes in and they tell me things." Now, everybody at this point would have the same reaction as me. You'd be like, "Okay, yeah, well, all right, yeah, maybe." And then just out of the blue, she says, and I write it down. I write the stuff they tell me down.
Oh, nice.
So I'm like, okay, I've got to have a look at this. I said, "Well, what do you do?" She said, "Well, I just put them into plastic sleeves and I keep them in clip files under my bed." So I said, "Oh, can I possibly have a look at some of this?" Anyway, she goes and gets one of these files, and you know what's coming next. She opens the file up, and I'm looking at, stuff that Stephen Hawking would struggle with, Einsteinian physics, Newtonian physics. I'm looking at stuff that, NASA would die to get their hands on. Honestly, just unbelievable stuff in here. And it's perfectly illustrated and it's perfectly written and the numbers all add up. And it's just absolutely incredible. Now, at that point, you've got to believe that she's meeting with an extraterrestrial force because the evidence is backing it up. And there's stuff that was in those files that at that point, I mean, we're going all the way back to the early 1980s. There's stuff at that point that was not known. There's a huge amount of stuff that's not known that I have subsequently seen. She had a whole section just on wormholes. And at that point, nobody even knew that wormholes existed. She drew them as spirals, as cones. She had all the maths and everything for that. So that's the kind of thing I'm into. If somebody comes to me and says, I'm whatever, channeling Jesus, or I'm, channeling aliens, or whatever's coming through, I automatically then start to dig. Most people don't know I'm doing it, so I'm giving away a trade secret here. I kind of poke to find out,
Well, what about, did you keep these files this lady had?
Right,
Where are they?
There's a really sad end to this, because
don't tell me.
Because her husband threw all the stuff out.
Oh,
passed away.
my
He
God.
couldn't bear to keep any of it.
Oh.
And I'd entrusted the young lad to get the files. I said to him, look, it doesn't matter what else you get.
Trash can.
And he was away on tour with the band. And he came home to find that he came back for the funeral and found that his dad had cleared the bedroom of everything. So there weren't that many files, I'll be honest. I seem to remember there being 3 or maybe 4 A4 clip files. So they weren't huge, but everything that was under the bed just went in the bin. So I was gutted, absolutely gutted. And I just don't have that kind of brain that I could remember stuff like that. It was off the Richter scale. But she lived for quite a while afterwards, so she must have written a lot more stuff after that. She.
Why didn't you ask her for them? Say, can I have these? How about I store them for you?
I know.
Maybe it was some kind of training she was in before she left.
Well, yeah, because there is no death, as you say. Death does not exist. It's a change of form. You just change wavelengths. So, plus the fact, I mean, who knows? At the very last minute, it might have been those Greys that came to get her. They might have been
the Greys. I don't like the Greys. No.
Well, she described. No, I'm not so keen. But that was the branch that she described. They were definitely Greys.
Well, there's supposed to be variations, I guess. Like there's different Greys.
Good Greys, bad Greys, and
big Greys, little Greys, fat Greys, skinny Greys.
There's some about so big.
Well, these were
saw them in a dream.
These were about 3'6", maybe 4 foot at the most. So I suppose they count as quite small, about the same size as the ones in the X-Files. That kind of size,
bigger than the little people.
Yeah, just bigger than the little, but not as big as the big.
Right. There was something that you said in the first half of the show that I heard, and I wanted to kind of get more information about it. You had mentioned Michelangelo, as some of his information was not accurate.
Michelangelo?
Was it
He's a famous sculptor.
Yeah. Was it? Did you say that?
I don't think I said no.
Michelangelo's
a sculpture. No, I didn't. Yeah.
Who was it then? It'll come back to me.
I definitely heard the question about what about all these ancient civilizations that are scattered all over the planet. I didn't really address that as an issue. So I picked up on that. And again, the short answer to that is yes. There's enough evidence now coming out with pyramids being everywhere and certain shaped doorways everywhere and stone cutting technologies everywhere, stretched elongated heads, that's everywhere. It's the same mathematics. It's the same,
Is Leonardo.
Leonardo da Vinci.
Did you mention him?
I mentioned the Da Vinci Code.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Were you thinking Dan Brown?
Misunderstood. Yeah.
Yeah, Dan Brown. I mean.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's an interesting one, that, because somebody said, is it history doing fiction, or is it fiction doing history? What is it? Is it true or false or what? Well, actually, the ruling of the judge who did the court hearing at the end, his ruling was that it's fiction doing fiction. Because it was when Bagent and Lee took him on with their book and they sued Dan Brown. That's a fabulous case, that where the two books are sort of going head to head. But at the end of the day, it's, you know, a couple of Freemasons and a Freemason having a ding dong in front of a Freemason. That's how that worked out. And, you know, the Bajent Lee book went in at number 2 and Dan Brown's book went in at number 1. And we all know what was going on there. It was all about making tons of money. But no, yeah, the judge ruled that both books were in fact fiction. So, yeah, don't believe what you read in the Da Vinci Code. It's very loosely based on legend.
Yeah, it's entertainment, right?
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is.
Entertainment. The elongated skulls. That's a good one, right? That's a good one. Because we have artifacts, right? We have
we've got them
all over.
Yeah.
They're not really localized to one area. So what's your take on that?
I think when they've tested the Paracas skulls, which have got to be the absolute humdingers of the lot because they're huge, enormous, they've come back with different DNA. So some people are going, oh, it's alien, and some people are going, no, it's not. It's another species of us. They are clearly not us because they are biologically different. They are a different, distinct species, and they were everywhere. You know, you can go to any part of the world. You go to Russia, Australia, you know, America, South America, anywhere you go, even in the UK, we had these people with these enormous heads. What's happened, though, the same thing's happened to these stretched heads as happened to crop circles, because you've got the real ones, and then all of a sudden everyone cashes in and you end up with a shed load of fakes. And what's happened with these elongated skulls, they obviously gave those people some kind of advantage. So then we start to copy them. So some of the stretched heads are genuinely stretched. Yeah, it's cradle boarding and wrapping them in bandages and deforming them and changing them, because obviously it's giving them abilities that they weren't born with. But, and this is the main thing, there are those species out there that are born that way, which we've actually lost. As I said, it's a real shame because Nazca Paracas died out about 400, 500 years ago. I would have been delighted to sit down and have a chat with one of those guys. You know what I mean? They were all wiped out when the Europeans went to South America because we took flu and smallpox and whooping cough and all this kind of thing. And it just wiped them out. And it's a shame because they were super, super intelligent race, incredible race of people. I cover it in Crystal Skulls and Human Heads because of I look at all the different aspects of it. I look at the different places that they turn up. I look at the size of the brain and what the brain would have been capable of. I mean, you couldn't have sneaked up on one of these guys because the back of the head, the bit that's bigger, is all your survival skills. You know, and what else did they have hidden away in there? Did they have ESP? Did they have telepathy? You know, what else could they do? You know, yeah, absolutely. And these guys are alive at the same time as we're seeing all the super technology. So the giant pyramids and the weird stoneworking and, you know, moving 50-ton blocks and all this kind of thing. That's when these guys are still alive and they're still operating. Last time I heard of any of them was in my research was that in medieval Europe, apparently there were Russian women that still had these huge heads, and they were traded into medieval Europe, and people really wanted them. The people were paying huge sums of money to have these Russian women with these enormous heads. So there must have been an advantage. All throughout, there must have been a significant advantage to having those large heads. But then that means they died out, certainly in Europe anyway, they died out probably about 600 or 700 years ago. The Russian Hunnic elongated skulls around about the same time, maybe 500, 600 years ago. But they're gone, you know, and we're worse off for it. You know, they're not there anymore. Does that cover it?
Back to the what was it? The Turin, the shrine.
Turin Shroud.
Yeah, let's go back to that because there was things popping into my head when you had said like when they tested the DNA, it was female, and was Jesus a woman?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, if it was male, it should have been XY.
Right.
And when they tested it, they got XX. But then if he's the product of a virgin, it should be XX. But the key, the confusing bit, is in the he. Now, the question that went through my mind was slightly different, because until we started correcting it at birth, there are still hermaphrodites.
Yes.
You know, and we only change that. We make the decision when somebody's born that way, but it wasn't always the case. Now, I'm not sufficiently well versed in genetics to know what the chromosomes would be for someone who was a hermaphrodite. Now, is that XX or is it XY?
Right.
Or
So
is
some
it?
cases 3, right? It'd be XXY.
Yeah, there could be an extra one. So I'm not really sure what that means in terms of how he would have functioned. It would certainly explain why he wasn't actually capable of reproducing. You know, that would explain why there isn't, you know, any nookie, any marital activity recorded in any scriptures anywhere. It's never recorded, never mentioned of him at all.
Right.
But then, as I said, he's got a playbook. He's got a playbook he's working to that's already pre-written. So at that point in history, 2,000 years ago, there are certain things you would have to fulfill that would then be evidence that you are, quote, the Son of God. You know, he would have to fulfill everything you find biblically, and then everything you find everywhere else as well, pretty much.
Yeah, but wasn't he was a rabbi, and don't rabbis have to get married?
Okay, that's a big rabbit hole to go down. Okay, how many people can I upset? Right, let's start at the beginning. Right, number one, he's not a Christian because that label didn't come in till the 2nd century.
No, he's not. He was Jewish.
Number 2, he's not Jewish because there were no
He
Jews.
was, what do they call that? A scene.
The temple. He could have been in a scene. Now that's a different thing. If he's in a scene, then he's not a rabbi. He's more like John the Baptist. He's going down a different avenue altogether. The Essenes didn't have to marry. They didn't have ladies to marry. So his actual, if you like, his ancestry is Hebrew, not Jewish, because he's of the tribe of David. So it's Old Testament and he's a Hebrew. So, you know, Josephus even doesn't call him Jewish because he's writing the history leading up to the destruction of the temple. So when he gets a mention, he doesn't call him a Jewish person. Rabbi as well, although he was given the same honor as a rabbi or a teacher, he could very well have been an Essene. I'm really going to get radical. He could have been a Gnostic, you know, or he could have been one of the other offshoots. You know, he could have been one of the desert hermits, you know, or whatever. Actually, the evidence points to, this is going to really upset folks, points to him being an Egyptian priest.
Yes.
Because at the age of 3, he disappears off into Egypt and he doesn't come back till he's 12. And when he comes back at the age of 12, they found him in the temple running rings around the guys in there who should have known better. You know, he absolutely hammers the rabbis. He's teaching them, and he's only 12 years old. Now, the key to that is the time he spends in Egypt. You know, Western Bible scholars have always said, like, you know, we don't really know what went on. Well, I've been to Egypt and I've actually stood in one of the places that he inhabited while he was over there. There's a Coptic chapel in Cairo where the Holy Family lodged. And you can actually get documentation over there that tells you exactly where he went, exactly what he did, which villages he visited and for how long. And some of the extra canonical stuff, the extra gospel stuff, is set in that period. So it's not like we don't know. It's not that we don't know. It's just people don't really want to go and have a look. I think they're really afraid to tread on toes. You know, if people think the Arthur book's a bit radical, I can't wait to get this one out. I just hope I live long enough, you know. So yeah, he's an interesting character, and I don't think we've really got to grips with who he really was. You know, people have not been realistic. There's 2,000 years of made up baggage that's been strapped on, you know, to the whole story, and you've really got to cut through that, you know, really got to cut through it.
Yeah, because also, like, if you think about, like, civilization and its developments and its biases, they're also, like, in the story. You know, they weave their way through it. So yeah, it's definitely like, I think it's a worthy story.
Yeah, I think somebody said
Yeah.
as well, history is the myth we all agree on. So we've only got a very, very, very limited, written record, extremely limited to go on. But it's a bit like anything else, if you sort of deviate from the rule book, you're not going to end up knowing how to play the game. It's like a set of instructions, and if you start leaving bits out and making stuff up, it doesn't work. And that's what the Bible is like. I mean, I always say to folks, the Bible's not the sort of happy clappy book that people think it is. It's God's way of telling the human race where it went wrong. It's just a book of mistakes. The witches called things like that the books of shadows. I think it's the greatest book of shadows ever written. It's 3,500 years of blunders and things that worked and things that didn't work. And but eventually, I suppose the moral of the tale is, once you're convinced that we're not particularly brilliant at what we do, that's where you move forward. You've took a massive step there. I like that saying. I always quote it, that a monkey is superior to a man in that when it looks in a mirror, it sees a monkey. That really nails it. We don't really see anything really as it really is. Back to this idea, we could even be self-creative. Maybe that's one of our talents that we've inherited from the creator. Maybe we're self-creative, and life in the hologram, maybe we're creating the hologram. Maybe we're projecting it. Is this the reality we're sharing because we're all in this reality at this moment in time? I don't have answers for that.
Right. And there's a lot of questions,
It sure is.
There's a lot of questions, I think. And the Bible sure is, I mean, was it it's the most published in the world? Or
it's absolutely. It's
like,
yeah. If you the leg of your bed snaps, you prop one end up with Lord of the Rings, you prop another one up with War and Peace, then you prop the other leg up with the Bible. It's like it's an enormous published work. Absolutely enormous. And people always say, oh, we haven't got a first edition, we've got no idea what the original scrolls were like. And well, I think I'm just somewhere between 800 and 900 first century scrolls at the moment. So it's always been pretty popular, and there's a hell of a lot of stuff out there. I'll tell you what I really want to find out. I want to find out what's in this library they've discovered in Tibet. They've got, was it 10,000?
Yeah,
10,000 scrolls or something, and they're all in nice little boxes, and they're all labeled. And so there's been rumors that it goes back to the beginning of time. So we seem to have found the missing library at Alexandria, and then a bit more than that. I'd love to get loose in there.
Yeah, no kidding.
I came across something recent that was talking about like Buddhists, that you can actually go back and trace like the Christian stories are coming from there. Like that there's even connections there, like with the Buddhist traditions.
Yeah.
So it's more like, and that's the other thing, like when we talk about like Arthur and there seems to be more than one Arthur, or we talk about Jesus and there's more than one Jesus, same with Merlin, there's more than one Merlin. It's almost like a story that worked, that just kept getting told.
There is sort of fact to the fiction, though. I've got 7 Arthurs, of which the famous one, the Welsh Arthur that we're talking about, I think is something like number 5, and they spread over a 300-year period.
Right.
But again, it's this appropriation of a name for a warrior. So, goodness knows how many Caesar Augustus there must be, and things like that. The Romans were beggars for doing it. Merlin, I've got 7 of them. And they seem to follow on one after another, after another, after another. So that's clearly a line. They're appointed as a Merlin. Jesus, like I said, tremendously popular name because it's actually Ishua, it's Joshua. And Joshua is, the person that goes thundering into the promised land and conquers the promised land and all this in the Old Testament. So that's why that was so popular. It's they didn't have a second name back then. What they would do is they'd use a middle sort of epithet, Bar. So you'd have, in this case, he'd be Yeshua Bar Joseph, because he's Joshua, son of Joseph. That's what you'd actually be looking for. And it's interesting because some of the bones boxes they've had out of Jerusalem, the burials from that first century, some of them are marked up like that. They have, a name, and then they have Bar, and then they have the father's name. So that seems to be the way of doing it. So that's how you'd know which Jesus you were talking to. But other cultures wouldn't have got that. They wouldn't necessarily have understood that. Oh yeah, his name's Joshua, Ishua, Jesus. Yeah, go on, we'll go with that. It's interesting because St. Patrick as well, back in the days of Arthur, just before the days of Arthur, when he went to Ireland to convert the Druids, they were actually waiting for a god called Esus. So when he got off the boat, Patrick, and he went, Jesus, they're like, okay, we know who Jesus is. Yeah, that's number 2. We'll tick that one off. And that's why he made so much headway with the Druids. Because they're like, yeah, we already know about that. We've been waiting for him to arrive for a while. Thanks for letting us know. So yeah, clearly there's a lot going on in that respect. Yeah. I don't have a problem with there being more than one of anything.
No. And as you say, it's a line, like maybe a lineage, like when you're talking.
It's just confusing with Jesus, though, because he pops up for about 500 days after his resurrection. So you've then got this question: okay, if he's now resurrected as an interdimensional being, then he can be all over the place anytime he likes, because he's ascended. So he could just pop up anywhere. And you've also got the same problem in the Old Testament, because there's quite a few times that, quote, God appears, that it's not some almighty, all creative being. It's clearly a physical form. So in the Old Testament, they think that's Jesus as well. So he appears before he's born, he appears when he's born, and then he appears after he's born. And if you really go into Revelation and stuff, and we're in the last days, and we've got eclipses and comets and all that, he's coming back. That's going to really play, tricks on you, because he can be anywhere. He can do anything. He might have decided he wanted to go and evangelize India, but he might have done it in his resurrected form.
Right.
These things are possible.
Right.
They're even waiting for Arthur to come back as well. I'm not so sure about that.
I don't know. I don't think that's what we need. I don't think we need a savior. I don't. I think we need to be together. Whatever that means.
I don't think he's coming back physically. Do you?
No, I don't.
No,
the consciousness, maybe the consciousness of love,
Christos.
But that's what I would say.
Well, you've got this thing now where they can project. You've got HARP and stuff like that, where they can throw images up into the skies, and they can fake an alien invasion and all the rest of it. And so I'm not sure how far that technology would, convince people that we're having a second coming, or whatever.
Yeah, well, it probably
or an alien
would.
invasion, or it probably would.
For sure. And then you have that voice to skull technology as well.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah.
I mean, is that not how they say that Maitreya will return? Like everybody will hear him, or everybody will see him.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities.
To do that. Yeah.
But again, I mean, if like I say, if Jesus was capable of doing everything he could do after he was resurrected, then he is going to come back in the resurrected form. So the idea of him just coming back as a physical bloke, and getting born as a human again and going through all that palaver again, nah, that's not going to happen. He's not going to, arrive on a motorcycle or anything. He's going to come as a spirit being riding in the clouds, or a vision, or whatever.
Finish the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do the same thing to him that they did the first time.
No, I know if he's coming back to finish the job.
He'd have to come back pretty damn spectacular.
I think he probably would. There's a few interesting snippets as well in sort of Daniel and Revelation and one or two other prophecies, where they talk about, the whole world will see, the whole planet will see, every eye will see, every, ear will hear. And that was only possible since the invention of television. You know, that 2,000 years ago, it just wasn't possible. So we are clearly living in a time when,
that we know,
yeah, well, that we know of, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you've got Egyptians with like electricity and light bulbs and planes and all kinds of stuff going on. So I'm not ruling out super technology, but now we're in a position where that could happen, you know, in the 21st century.
Yeah, sure. So fascinating, isn't it? So fascinating. It's just so much.
I bet tonight hasn't gone in the slightest bit the way you thought it was going to. Well, there you go.
I love it. Yeah, I do. I love it. Well, you know, I also wonder if we have just complicated the whole thing. You know, like sometimes I feel that we over analyze, and I think a lot of these answers are staring us right in the face. Don't ask me what they are. But
it's back to what that fella said to me ages ago. You know, there's me sat up a tree for 3 days wondering what this strange spiritual force is. And the bloke just says, well, why don't you try talking back? You know, sometimes it really is that obvious, you know, it really is. If we believe, I mean, there are a lot of people out there that do truly believe in angels and spirit beings and whatever your particular thing is, whether it's greys or fairies or Bigfoot or whatever it is. If you truly believe, then you would do something about it. That's the argument at the end of the day. You know, if you want to attract a Bigfoot, go and stand in the woods and shout for one. You know, do something obvious and make it so that whatever it is you're trying to attract knows that you're trying to do that. You know, it wouldn't be any different if you wanted, you know, the angel Gabriel or God himself. You know, you just talk back. It's like you say, it really is that obvious. You know, it's so big we've missed it. You know, like you say, we're masters of picking out the detail. You know, and broad sweeps of the brush. You know,
I go out in the driveway and say, I'm here, come and get me. That's no joke.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, at this point, I think it'd be a rescue attempt. I think
right,
if we got abducted.
Yeah. Abort the mission. Pick me up.
Take me now. I'm fed up with it. I don't want to be down here anymore. Well, I guess we all get to take that trip at the end anyway. Nobody gets out of here alive, but you know, it'll be interesting. In a way, I can't wait for that. You know, I'm quite eager to. My dad passed away in 2021, so you know, and my mum like a couple of years before that, so I'm quite familiar with that. But I have a really strange view on death. You know, I don't sort of walk around wailing and moaning, and because you know, I don't think we disappear. You know, we don't vanish. You know, it's entropy. You can't just destroy the energy and the being. You know, it doesn't just vanish. We just go somewhere else. I'm just dying to find out where the somewhere else is. You know.
Yeah, there's so many people out there. It's like, why don't they tell us where the somewhere else is?
Well, there's got to be some rules, you know. I think there's some rules involved there, you know. Just like we can't go swimming in the sea like fish, and we can't go, you know, out into space and hope to survive because we're not made that way. Then, at this point, we're not built to cross over. But clearly, it can be done. I mean, you're back onto Jesus again. You know, he's clearly done it. Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's possible, and we're getting stuff coming back the other way all the time. You're getting, you know, ghosts and demons and all sorts. You know, there's stuff coming through all the time.
Well, that was what I was going to say. Like the way the story goes, there's only one way in and one way out, right? Birth or death. But I'm starting to think that there's not. There's multiple ways in and out.
I think there's only two parts of the process that we have no control over, because we're born when we're supposed to be, and we die when we're supposed to die. And at the moment, there's absolutely nothing we can do to change that. And the argument would be as well, if you manage somehow to find out a way of extending your life, when that life comes to an end is when you were supposed to end anyway. So I don't think you can play with those two ends of time. You know, when you go, you go. When you come, and that's it. But, and this is, like you say, this is the kicker. I think there's a lot of gaps in between. There's a lot of stuff going on in between. And we've got the whole of history to support that. You know, there's not a single race of human beings that haven't believed in something beyond what is here. You know, I think that's universal. If you want to go all the way back and call it Atlantean, you know, Atlantean technology, Atlantean spirituality, or, you know, Lemuria or Mu or whatever, any of the previous races, they've all got the same basic idea that what we see and what we live in, this is not it. This is not the limit. You know, it doesn't stop here.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, have you ever, like, if you had like lucid dreams or like astral travel, like, have you ever experienced any of that, Mark?
I did as a teenager. I think a lot of people. I don't lucid dream. I tried. You know, I tried to sort of get to grips with that, and I failed miserably. The astral traveling thing, I've had the bed spinning when in fact I'm just lying in it, you know, but something's spinning. The idea of raising up away from your body so you can turn around, look back and see yourself. I've had that. And then you've also got the bit where you get pulled back. So you wake up suddenly with a jolt and your heart's doing, like, you know, 100 miles an hour. I've had a lot of that happen. But then I've sort of allowed that not to develop. That wasn't an avenue I decided I wanted to go down.
Right.
My thing was always ghosts,
Hmm.
because I grew up in a haunted house. So, you know, stuff was happening all the time. It was pretty scary to begin with, you know, the idea of apparitions and things disappearing. And the house I'm in now, this house, which is the family home, is built on a Romano-Saxon burial ground. So we actually have bodies under us. We have bodies in the front and back garden. You know, they're all over the place, going back to 2,000 years. So, you know, it's hardly surprising it's haunted,
yeah.
you know.
Did you move? I hope you moved.
Oh, I don't want to move. I'm quite happy.
Oh.
You know, over the years, we've kind of developed a relationship with the ghosts. It's quite unusual. I kind of got to know them when I was a kid, and I knew what was going on. It was scary at first, and then I've obviously got lots of friends who've experienced stuff, and people have seen things, and it was scary for them at first. But then, you know, by the time I'd moved out when I was in my 20s, so it didn't really affect me then. But I was quite used to it, and I've met lots of, you know, things like that, ghosts, spirits, and entities and things over the years. So they really don't spook me. When I came back, it was a bit creepy. Things started happening again, but I think it was because we had the builders in. And the builders were so frustrated. They'd put something down and just look away and look back, and it had gone. You know, and 3 or 4 days later, it had turned up somewhere else. And I've got to tell you, there's a great story. That the guy that was in charge of one of the groups of builders, the heavy labourers. He was about 5'0" tall, ex-SAS, you know, bodybuilder, covered in tattoos, really, you know, rough, you know, like the guys you'd find on the streets of Glasgow, you know, proper hard man. And he came walking up the front path, and he waved to me dad in my dad's bedroom window, and my dad waved back. And then he knocks on the door. I open the front door, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Your dad's looking good today. He's all scrubbed up. He's got his suit on and his flat hat, you know." And I've just waved to him, and I said, "No, you haven't, because he's stood at the back sink doing the washing up, and he hasn't moved." And all the colour drained out of this guy's face. He just went white. And I said, "It's funny you should say it's a guy in a flat hat." I said, "Because that is one of our most seen ghosts, is the old fella in the flat hat, who I think was responsible for building the house, because we're only the second owners from when it was built. It was built in 1925. Now, there's a nice little touching ending to this, because the builders, we discovered we'd got a half cellar, and the half cellar here is about 4 foot deep, and it's there for drainage, keeps the property dry. So we put a camera down through the hatch to have a look. You know, we filmed it on a mobile phone, and about 6 foot away from the hatch, buried in the ash, is a flat hat. And it's the same flat hat that the builder saw. So the guy that built the house has left one of his flat hats behind. So it's little things like that, you know. I mean, that was like 2 years apart, with the guy seeing the ghost and then finding the flat hat, you know. So they're still here. These things do occasionally happen, but now we live here quite happily. We're at peace with our spirits, you know.
Don't they have a TV show like that? I don't know what the name of it is, but it's like, I think there's these people that live in this house, but there's also like 5 or 6 ghosts there.
I believe that, I think it might be called Ghost House, actually, but there's quite a few of them. You know, they've done a haunted village, and there's, you know, we had Most Haunted over here in the UK. It's really started all the ghost things off in a big way. And then there's a lot of them now. There's a lot of these supernatural go and find
I think
it
it's
type thing.
just part and parcel, right? The UK, like
Yeah.
we have so much, like and it's almost like residue energy, like battles, like especially in Scotland, like you walk across the field and you can feel it.
Yeah.
It's like all the turmoil, you know, like air.
Well, one of the books I did on the disappearing Ninth Legion actually puts the
Oh,
final battle for them we put in Scotland, because a lot of people do. There's a guy sort of up there on one of the Roman roads. He tells a fabulous story. He came out of his farmhouse one night and his barn was all lit up. He wondered what was going on. So he walked into his barn and it wasn't his barn. When he walked in, it was like a banqueting suite for Romans. They're all sat round the table eating food and all in full colour. And this guy's a farmer. So when he described what he saw, archaeologically, he managed to get it absolutely bang on. But he said he started to feel uncomfortable because people in the room started to be able to see him. So he backed out of the barn. And when he glanced back, it was back in darkness again. There's a nice little postscript to that as well, because he came to renovate the barn. So when he took the floor up and one or two other bits and bobs, he had the archaeologist in, because it was a really old barn. And guess what they found underneath? They found the banqueting suite for a Roman villa.
Oh, wow.
So that's a time slip. You're talking about a full-on, full apparition time slip. And that story's in the book. It's, that went in because it's such a good story.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like you say, everywhere, all over the UK,
Everywhere.
we live with it. We just live with it.
I think that happens up at Gettysburg too, where they have time slips up there in some of the buildings.
Yeah, I believe so. I've heard stories of that, and
Mhm.
and also when it goes foggy and misty, you see shadows, and you can hear gunshots and cannon shots and things like that. You can hear the battle, and we have that here as well. We have the sounds of battle that come on certain nights, and apparitions.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of that.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm sat here now and I'm looking around the room going, where are you beggars? Oh, you're not listening to this. I don't want nothing thrown at me or anything like that,
Maybe they want to join the show.
Oh, they'd be welcome. Well,
if
as long as
anything happens, I'll let you know.
Yeah. Oh, Madeline has the story about, well, who is it? The general, like he's the civil war.
General Beauregard. I was sitting in my living room when I lived in Georgia, and I don't know what his first words. I'm there. Are you talking to me? I said, who is this? He says, it's General Beauregard. I said, General Beauregard? Who's General Beauregard? I said, well, what do you want? He says, keep moving forward. Okay. And then I looked it up, and here he was like second in charge of the Southern,
Absolutely,
army in the South fighting the Civil War.
That's
one of the
behind him. That was good.
Yeah, that's one of the best parts of the whole supernatural thing, is when all the pieces come together. When you can actually put faces to them and places to them and things like that. That I've had a great thrill over many years. Discovering information about various happenings.
Well, it's confirmation. You know?
It is. Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe, the apartment complex that I was living in was built on some kind of, grounds that maybe the Southern Army had a, a complex there, or set up camp.
Or marched going forward.
Yeah.
Or it's just a time
forward.
Slip. Maybe he just brought you a message that was important,
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people say that. Keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like to say too. Forward we go.
I guess that's one of the best feelings anybody can get anywhere, really, is if something that is otherworldly or something that's clearly coming from elsewhere is kind of cheering you on. It's that invisible support, whether it's ancestors or characters from history or angelic beings or whatever it is. That doesn't half boost you. It gets like a huge push. As you say, keep moving on. keep moving on.
Well, then I was sitting here at my desk and I hear, get those angel cards. I'm like, what? I don't know who that was, but I don't really know where they are right now. The next day, go get those angel cards. It's like, really? And then the third day, I hear it again. I said, okay, I'll get the angel cards. So I go and I get the angel cards, and I says, no, here they are. What do you want me to do? And they said, start sending them out to people. They said, don't give any explanation, just send them out and, let them do their research on the angel or whatever. I've been doing this for the last 3 years.
Wow.
If not longer.
Yeah, I love getting my card. Indeed. Love it. Yeah. It's always friendly.
I love it when you get a prompt as well, and you kind of you follow it. I mean, it's a shame. Do you imagine what the human race would be like if everybody listened? If we all did what we felt was the right thing to do when we're told, we'd revolutionize planet Earth, literally.
Yeah.
Overnight, it would change the entire, way that we were moving forward. So,
there you go, moving forward.
Encourage the listeners, move forward.
Keep moving forward. Then in my room, I have some kind of black hole because things just disappear. I mean, they literally disappear.
That's my entire house. My entire house does that. You put anything down, it just disappears. Then it reappears about 3 days later.
Right. I had I use these Freestyle Libres for my diabetes, and I had the little package. I said, I'll put it here because I know I'm going to need it, in the next couple of days. It's gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gone.
I can't remember what the last thing to vanish on me was, but I went looking for something the other day and it gone. It wasn't where I'd left it. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's like a never-ending scavenger hunt.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's really, and it just vanishes. It's like
went somewhere though, like maybe interdimensional and then be back again.
I know my friend Karen said, well, it's in it. Corinne, she's my lost thing finder. And she said, it's in the drawer in the back. Well, I tore the drawer apart, 2 drawers, and it's not there. And then she says, well, don't fret, it'll show up. I says, yeah, I know, it'll probably show up after I get the ones that are on order.
Well, as soon as you stop looking for something, it tends to turn up. That's another thing.
Or it shows up in a place that you looked.
That's even more frustrating.
Right?
Absolutely.
And you're like, what?
I mean, it's a general principle, isn't it? Apart from toast hitting the floor, butter side down, you always end up with one sock and then 3 coat hangers that you didn't put in the wardrobe. What's going on there? Where are these things coming from? Where are they disappearing to? It's kind of a rule of life, isn't it? I think sometimes I think the divine creator must be sat on a cloud somewhere with a huge smile on its face, going, "Yeah, I've just built this little bit of humor in, just to keep you guys on your toes,
Yeah, it's like
there's a saying, right? If you want to make God laugh, make a plan.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a moral in that.
Well, give your information to our listeners so they know how to get in touch with you, because the show's soon going to end.
Wow, that's absolutely
fast, right?
Wow, that really has gone. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to keep it dead simple. If folks want to come find me, I'm on Facebook. If you link with me on Facebook, as long as your name isn't Fifi Trixabel and you've got a butterfly as your icon, you know the ones, no photos, no details. Otherwise, I'll delete you if you look like that. But if you're a real person, I'll accept you. You can talk to me on Messenger. I'm on Facebook. That's my primary source, if you like. If you want any of the stuff, back catalogue that I've done, go and have a look at YouTube. Just type in Mark Olly, Lost Treasures, and you'll be there for weeks, because there's loads of it, absolutely loads of it. Book-wise, publications-wise, Amazon. Type my name into Amazon, and then just, whatever your book title is, Polychronicon, Robin with a Y, Hood with an E, or, any of the others, you'll find them. So it's really that simple. Facebook, YouTube, Amazon. There you go.
There you go.
And when does the keys
Keys to the Templars or Keys to the Temple, or I know, the reason I can't call it Keys to the Temple is it's already been done. So that's a lesson in point about, you know, titles. So it's going to have a longer title than that as well, and something that will include something biblical. I'm aiming that for 2025.
Okay.
So you guys are well ahead of the game. That would have took about 26 years to get into print, maybe 27. So, because I've done 3, I mean, since lockdown, you know, I've done 3 books in 18 months. That's quite some.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. That's great. It's fantastic.
Are you talking to someone here who usually takes 3 years just to do one? You know, I'm not prolific, but it's been that way recently.
Well, you have 9 books. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's
I started in 1997. I did the first one, so you know, yeah, it's not bad.
That's very good.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I've got my reading list now.
Hey.
I've got my books.
Start with the most recent ones and work backwards. That's what I'd say.
Okay. Well, I kind of want to like kind of work up to the keys being released, you know?
Yeah. There's a hint of what's coming in the King Arthur book.
All right.
But as I said earlier, if you go for the Arthur one, I would recommend just pay the couple of quid extra. Go for the hardback. Yeah.
Okay.
It takes a few days longer for it to arrive, but it's worth it, believe me. It is.
Yeah. I love my books. I do.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I love them. Yeah, this has been great. And there's the music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear it.
Oh, here's the music. Well, thank you, listeners, for listening to Life in the Hologram on Revolution Radio. Thank you, Mark.